So hi, everybody. You might want to pin me so you're just seeing me. I don't know if Marilyn can do that or not, but um, what I'm seeing is a gallery. So I'm getting going here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me back. I had such a good time the last time I was here. And so I invite you to simply sit back, relax, and enjoy. Just take it in. My only hope is that you'll understand. And there you have my email address, alberthasselbeck@gmail.com. You can email me anytime you want. You can also find me at my website, paulhasselbeck.com, and my podcast at metaphysicalromp2.com. Okay, so are you ready to order? That's the question. And this is essentially a 12 powers talk. And so here's a little roadmap for you. I'm going to share with you some 12 power basics. Then I'm going to talk about the power of order. And then I'm going to talk about spiritual law. And so a good point to start for me always is, so what about God? What is God? So Mother Myrtle said, God is it, neither male nor female, but principle. In fact, Myrtle said, God is not a being with parts like man. So Myrtle Fillmore believed God is principle. And then what about Charles? Well, Charles, in the Revealing Word, defined mind. He said, by the term mind, we mean God, the universal principle which contains all principles. Imagine this principle that contains every principle. So what is principle? Well, it's not that principle for sure, is it? So in Merriam-Webster, we can see that principle is defined as an underlying faculty or endowment. And it also can be defined as a comprehensive and fundamental law. Now, at first, when I thought about this with Myrtle and Charles, I thought they were avoiding law because I hadn't really looked deeply into the principle and the definition of it. But by saying God is principle, they are including faculties and laws. And of course, there are 12 powers, and those are 12 faculties, and there's many, many more principles as well. So when Charles says God is a universal principle, which includes all principles, he was really saying this. God is a universal principle, which includes all principles and laws, not human laws, but it could include the laws of science, because spiritual laws are immutable and unchangeable, as are the laws of science. So these things that makes up God, principles and laws, are unchangeable things. And then from Eric Butterworth, we have this little bit of interest. Now you may say, where does God come in then? And he says, well, God doesn't come in. God never went out. You see, we are so focused from earlier traditions that God's out there somehow. Well, God is out there. However, God is also right here. This is the way Eric Butterworth said it. God is spirit, present in its entirety at every point in space, all at the same time. Think about that. That right there at the point of view, how many points in space is your body taking up? Well, every one of those points of space contain the entirety of God. And look, we don't add up all of those points of space to get the entirety of God, because I just said all of it is right there at the point of view. Not a piece, not a part, not a wave, not a drop. The entirety of God is right there at the point of view. And so when we're talking about the 12 powers, we are talking about 12 faculties. We are talking about 12 principles. And here are 5 ideas that relates to all principles. Everyone has them, whether conscious of them or not. Everyone is always using them. You cannot not use them, but you can sure use them unconsciously, or most of the time, we're not even aware we're using them. They don't care how they are used. They don't tell you how they use them. They simply are. They can be overdeveloped or underdeveloped, and they can be used from all states and all levels of consciousness. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. So today is about the power of order. It's our ability to organize, our ability to sequence, our ability to balance, and the ability to adjust. And I'm betting many of you didn't know that it included the ability to adjust. And when you think about it, it's adjustment that organizes things. It's adjustment that sequences things. It's balance that is adjusted when something gets out of balance. It's the power we use to adjust our consciousness when we're going down the wrong track. As soon as we're aware of that, it's our responsibility to use our power of order to adjust ourselves. So when we think about the power of order and we think of it being underdeveloped, I bet what pops into your mind right away, a disorderly desk or even a disorderly mind. And when you think of the power of order, where someone's using the power of order in an overdeveloped way too much, I bet you think of OCD, don't you? Is that's the person who has to have everything just so. That picture can't be crooked. But notice, in order to make the picture uncrooked, that person has to adjust it. So we use it to organize, to sequence, to balance, and to adjust. And so these are kind of the necessary things we always talk about when we're talking about each of the powers. So it's associated with the Apostle James, the son of Alphaeus. And frankly, folks, the only good reason to know which apostle is associated with which power is if you're doing a metaphysical Bible interpretation with that apostle in it. Otherwise, it's just interesting information. And the location is at the navel. And you might be going, well, why at the navel, Paul? Why is order at the navel? That makes no sense. Well, it does, because it's your navel that's the remnants of where your mother's umbilical cord was attached. And just think about that. When that first zygote, that first egg is attached, that one little egg right there at the umbilical cord, it starts to grow. And it doesn't grow in random ways. It's very, very orderly. First 2 cells, then 4, then 8, and 16. And think about the organization that's happening when you are in your mother's womb. So that organization factor is governed by the power of order. And then we have the color olive green. Well, maybe you've already thought of why that's the color for order. Well, olive green is the color of the army, isn't it? The color of some of the tanks, the color of the uniforms. Well, at least some of them today, because some of them are changed to a camouflage sort of pattern. However, olive green is a fitting color for the power of order. And it works with love to create harmony. See, the power of love is our ability to harmonize. And isn't harmonizing a way in which we become balanced and in order some way? So you could see that this power of order is behind harmony as well. So that's the power of order. And you might be wondering, well, Paul, why are you also talking about spiritual law? Well, in Charles Fillmore's 12 Power book, something very interesting happens that most students don't even notice. Chapter 10, the title of that, the chapter on order, is actually titled Spiritual Law and Order. And wasn't it clever of Charles Fillmore when he's talking about 12 powers, 12 principles, and God is the principle which contains all principles. God is the principle which contains all principles and laws, that he was able to sneak in spiritual law in at least one place in the book. And there's a reason for that. So in the Revealing Word, Charles Fillmore defines divine order this way. He says, order is the first law of the universe. Think about that, because Myrtle said it too. Order is the first law of the universe. When we look at the universe and we know of its complexity, we also know how orderly it is. And then he goes on to say, indeed, there could be no universe unless its various parts were kept in perfect order. Well, do you think there's a God running around somehow keeping it all in perfect orderliness? No, it's law that keeps things orderly. He says, orderliness is law and is the test of true science. If any of you have a science background, you know in one way or the other, it's orderly. It can look messy, it can look chaotic, but underneath is this order. And so what is this thing called divine order? Well, he says, and this is in the chapter on order, man can never exercise dominion until he knows who and what he is. And knowing this brings forth that knowledge into the external by exercising it in divine order, which is mind, idea, and manifestation. And friends, when I was doing the research on the power of order, I had never seen that paragraph when I was reading that chapter until I was doing my research. Has that ever happened when you go back to a book and you see something that you never noticed before? And for me, it was like a aha moment. It was like discovering toast for the first time. It was like, oh my God, divine order isn't what I thought it was. Divine order is this orderly sequence of mind, idea, manifestation, and how everything comes into existence in this orderly way. We know it today as mind, idea, and expression. And just think about that for a moment. Because as you're thinking, you're using mind, idea, expression. In fact, your mind, my mind, all of our minds cannot not use this law that Charles called divine order. Mind, idea, expression. And so let's look at this a little deeper. So man can never exercise dominion until he knows who and what he is. And then he said in Keep It True Lent, we must know who and what we are. And there's another book by a wonderful author called Imelda Shanklin that's entitled, What Are You? Have you ever thought about that you're a who and a what? And he goes on to say, we must take our place in the Godhead and marshal our forces. That's another way of saying oneness, isn't it, folks? And then in another quote, he says, the I am is the metaphysical name of the spiritual self. And by the way, I am is another name for God. I am is another name for principle, because God, I am, your spiritual self, is the same thing. The I am is the metaphysical name of your spiritual self, as distinguished from your human self. Had you ever thought of it that way? That you have a spiritual self, which isn't a self like your human self, but it is something magnificent. It's amazing. It's God, it's principle, it's the I am. And so you see, you are fully human and fully divine. And in our divinity, we're identical. That's why we can say with authority, we are one. Because in our divinity, there's no distinction from you or me. In our divinity, it's that spirit that Eric Butterworth was talking about. Your divinity is that entirety of God that exists at every point in space, all at the same time. So in our divinity, we are all the same. In our humanity, we're wondrously unique, aren't we? Think of all the different ways that humans are unique. And another thing is, in our humanity, yeah, I'm fully human, but I don't think any of us use the full potential of our humanity, the full range of our humanity. And the same thing is true about our divinity, isn't it? We're not using all of our divinity. We can't use all of our divinity at the same time, though we are still fully human, fully divine. And in our divinity, we are infinite. That's why we can sing, I am free and I am unlimited, because in our divinity, we're infinite. But in order to be a human, a specific human, a specific Paul with a body and a personality, I have to somehow limit that infinity of my divinity to something very specific. So in my divinity, I'm infinite. In my humanity, I'm finite. And at any moment in time, I can change how I'm showing up as a human being. And so can you. And so Jesus was fully human and fully divine. Isn't that just the cutest picture? Can't you just see that? Can you just understand how Mary's patience must have been tried with this person? And so we are a who, and we are a what. And so divine order. So divine order is not a male deity, or any deity for that matter, dictating what shall be or not be. Divine order is not an event. It's the process by which we order our lives. It's the thinking process by which we order our lives. It's mind, idea, expression. And so, folks, we have the power of order, which is this principle, which is balance and sequence and adjustment. And we have divine order, which is this law. It's a law by which we orderly manage our lives through mind, idea, expression. So, are you ready to order? Are you really ready to step into the full responsibility of realizing you are the one that are divinely ordering your life? You are the one that's doing that. I'm the one that's doing that. So I hope as you go forth this week, you remember to use your power of order to adjust your life in exactly the way you want it to be. And I want you to also remember while you're doing that, you're using the law of divine order, mind, idea, expression. And friends, so it is. And thank you for listening.